Our actual product is a social media agent. It creates social media content for businesses, and mostly B2B businesses. So obviously if we can figure out how often they're posting and then reference that in an email out to them, it's really cool. So you go, you only posted like twice in the last month on LinkedIn, use Coso and you can post 5 times a week in probably less time it took you to post twice last month.
James Flynn. James is the founder of Coso.ai, a company helping businesses improve their social media content and utilize AI to increase volume, but also retain quality.
I met one of our customers this morning for a coffee. We had a chat. We basically use the AI to kind of supercharge that as opposed to like replace the authenticity. And he's basically going to come back to me over the weekend with a document that's a few thousand words explaining like the narrative around like his early business life, how he believes the way he is, like what methodology he brings into his business coaching. He's going to come back to me with like a 3,000 word document on Monday. He's going to assist writing that with ChatGPT. We're going to then come up with a content plan based on that. That's like 2 posts a week for the next 3 months, all based on his actual lived experience. I think that's the way you want to use it.
What is your current go-to AI tool and what are you actually using it for on a day-to-day basis?
So I'm kind of, for background, originally technical, but now I'm kind of I am the CEO of our company, but I'd be kind of a technical CEO. So while I'm in charge of like sales and go to market and that sort of thing, I'm still kind of, obviously it's a good time to be a technical CEO, given likes of Claude Code and all that sort of stuff. So I use like those kind of coding tools for a lot of like pinpoint stuff and like building like one-page web applications for like demonstrating concepts and prototyping UI and a bunch of stuff like that. But the actual stuff that I use, that's kind of actual products. Couple of things I found really, really useful. On the sales side, the CRM we use is called Atio. Mm-hmm. And basically it's an AI native CRM. So its competition is like HubSpot or whatever. But it's got a really cool feature. The AI nativeness was basically a fake tagline up until about 6 months ago. And they had a cool data model, but there was like no AI built into it. It was cool you could build a script to interact with the API in a nice way because the data model was nice. They built their own AI agent into it now. So my sales day has become, I have a Google Doc open, I have it here open in another tab, and I just make rough notes of everything I do throughout the day and just make sure I get the email address right and like this person, blah, 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 here's my notes from the conversation. And then at the end of the day, I just paste that into their AI agent and it updates every single deal and all the contacts and all the things. It's honestly, it's probably saving me like an hour a day at least in terms of just like rough notes, and then it has some fuzzy matching on. Like I can just be like, oh, Sandy at pit stop, and it will figure out your actual email address and like make the association. So it's pretty cool. And then on the product side, which is maybe less relevant for the audience, but super, super cool if anyone listening has like dev teams and stuff. PostHog is our product analytics tool. So it's become the de facto for a lot of software products over the last few years. They're out like Silicon Valley. They've been running for a few years. Really, really cool product. Really, really nice for a load of use cases. But they have a really cool AI agent now. So if we want to check like, what users are having issues, I can literally query it and be like, what users are having issues with the product this week? And like, can you cluster those into like buckets? And it will come back with like the clustered buckets and then the recordings of the sessions of all the users in each bucket. So I can sit down once a week and just spend like half an hour just looking at the issues and figure out what we need to make tickets for it to resolve with the developers next week, as opposed to, that's basically an impossible task as a startup when you're head of product and head of sales. You just don't have time to do that typically. You kind of sometimes come across customers that you can like pick up things from when you're chatting to customers, but you don't have the time to like go through that without something like that. So that's really, really useful, really, really cool as well. Yeah.
It's really interesting, going off script slightly. This is a conversation we had. So for context, you were one of the speakers at our event in Dublin about 3 weeks ago by the time that this episode will go out. And Emmett, our founder of Pitstop, he actually raised this. And it was this idea that as kind of AI becomes more and more prevalent, organizations need fewer, I guess, like almost product orientated people, developers, things like that. And there's more of a move towards go-to-market folks. And Richie, our CEO, had a look at job roles on LinkedIn recently, and for go-to-market there was like within a company, I think it was OpenAI actually, there was like 74 job roles within go-to-market, but then on the dev side there was about 7 roles. I just love to get your thoughts on that, given that you are kind of from that sort of product technical background but are now kind of balancing both as a founder. Is that something that you've noticed across the industry as well, as AI, makes the kind of development process easier and things? It'd just be great to get your kind of thought, because it's a rhetoric I'm seeing more and more across LinkedIn, outside of Pitstop as well. I'm seeing people talk about this.
I think like when it comes to this, there's kind of two different elements there. So one is like specifically around like product and engineering and stuff. So there's like roughly three kind of technical roles go into making like software products. So right, you're like you got your product owner, you got your UX UI designer, and you got your engineer.
Mhm.
And obviously that could be multiple people in each of those roles or whatever. Um, what a lot, Mark Andreessen is like a really big investor in the US who
Yeah.
honestly talks a lot of like, he has a lot of terrible opinions these days. But he has a few good opinions as well. And one of those opinions, I think he rephrased this really well. He's like, you can basically, if you're a good at product, good engineer, or a good designer, you can kind of get mediocre in the other two using AI. So it means that you don't
Mm.
necessarily need one of the other two skill sets to get a product out the door, but you're probably not going to be amazing in the other two skill sets if like that's not your actual skill set. Whatever you're very good at, it accelerates that, but you can get to like a mediocre level in almost anything without having to have that resource. So it's still, if you still want to build like a best in class product, you still need each of those roles: designer, engineer, and product. World class person in each of those roles, but you can certainly like fill in the gaps until you have that person. Um, specifically on the engineering side, there's actually I've seen this from a couple of sources. I haven't like verified it myself. Apparently, there's more software engineering roles open today in the US than there ever has been.
Oh, really?
Um, and part of that is the fact that companies. It turns out, like when we got internet, no one went to a 4-day working week. We just started doing more, and then like SaaS became a thing, and everyone's more efficient again. We just like same people do more, and that seems to be a pattern. Like I'd be all for a 3 or 4 day working week, like with the efficiency gains or whatever. But it seems like companies are just doing more with the same amount of staff primarily. Barring the companies that have, the whole AI firing thing is, I think, massively overblown, and it's largely a cover story from companies who don't want to admit, who are publicly traded, or going for their next round of private investment, don't want to admit they overhired because that's a mistake. So they'll say, "Oh, AI has happened, and now we need to reduce headcount." Uh, there's exceptions to that rule probably, but I think the vast majority of that is kind of, you know, not AI related. Those kind of firings and stuff. Yeah.
It's really interesting. Going back to what you said before that, this idea of kind of AI agents. I know you said using one within Atio, but AI agents isn't necessarily something new. But I've certainly noticed over the past couple of months. I guess this is me going further and further down the rabbit hole of
Mm-hmm.
this AI world, but also just in general, it seems to be becoming more and more prevalent. Every product, Atio, whatever it is, are suddenly debuting an agent as well to kind of help out with that. I know one of the main sort of crux of your talk at the event was about how you built a kind of sales agent for pretty cheap, and utilize that. And something I noticed wandering around the event, I was sort of capturing content and stuff, is your talk was probably the one where most people were holding their phones up and taking pictures. Like
Yeah.
it looked like a live concert from the back. Everyone was holding their phones up and taking photos. So it's clear that was a hugely important part for most of the 100 or so people that were there, was this idea of kind of AI agents and stuff. I don't want to kind of dumb it down too much, but can you maybe go into the journey of you kind of building this sales agent, and what the problem was that you were trying to solve, and maybe some moments that you were sort of surprised by it? And I'm not saying give us a complete play by play, because otherwise I'm sure we'd be here forever. But can you go through the touch points and kind of that journey for you, and sort of why you wanted to create it?
Yeah, for sure. So that's it. Yeah, no, it's good to know, because I didn't actually, obviously, when you're focused on speaking yourself at something, you're not really paying attention. You're like, what do I say next, as
You're
opposed
in
to
the
looking at
zone. Yeah.
when people are taking photos. So that's good to know. But yeah, I think so. The problem there's also, or currently, or like average monthly revenue per customer is like 150 euro a month, and we're a B2B product.
Mhm.
So there's two ways there's two different ways we can scale. But if you're specifically talking about like one-to-one outbound sales or one-to-one sales to small businesses, basically traditionally you for a product that's like 1.5 grand a year, contract size, or 2 grand a year or whatever, it's very hard to have that work with a sales, like a BDR hammering phones or something, because the unit economics just don't make sense in most cases, unless you have like, infinite, like 3-year retention on average of customers, and then you're still in the hole for the first 2.5 years, with that particular customer. But so, that's basically the problem that we need to solve. The other alternative is like running loads and loads of meta ads and getting like inbound leads. But obviously, that's super expensive. We're a startup company. We raised a bit of money, but we're not, we haven't raised or big rounds of investment yet where we can compete with the big US companies in terms of ad spend for a similar demographic of customers. So we burn through our money. So that's not an option either. So we're like, well, how do we accelerate our sales process in a way that's actually economically viable for us? And so AI agents are really interesting for that, obviously, because you can kind of get them to do pinpoint solutions that traditionally required employees in a lot of cases, like that reviewing call transcripts or reviewing customer demos on like our product, or like updating all the CRM stuff. So I forget exactly where I saw the idea for this or what was I thinking about it for. But anyway, over the course of a weekend, I was able to put together a sales agent, and essentially, it whenever we get a new customer, it finds 100 lookalike customers using Apollo.io. And essentially what it does is it takes the call transcripts of onboarding on new customers and mirrors their language and puts that into an outbound sequence on email and LinkedIn targeting the lookalike customers. So it mirrors the language used by the customer to sign up with us, customized entirely for their business. We also get a bit of external data added to that as well. So as part of that process, we automatically scrape their social media feeds to figure out how often they've been posting. Our actual product is a social media agent that creates social media content for businesses, mostly B2B businesses. So obviously, if we can figure out how often they're posting and then reference that in the email out to them, it's really cool. It's like personalized. So you go, you only posted like twice in the last month on LinkedIn, use Coso and you can post 5 times a week in probably less time it took you to post twice last month. Super, super personalized message. If they're posting 10 times a month, we're like, hey, that takes a lot of time. So use Coso and you'll save a few hours a month. Or, there's 2 different kind of angles we can go with that. And basically, the AI agent just like, based on how often they've been posting, customizes that message using language that is mirrored to the lookalike customer that signed up, puts them into an outbound LinkedIn and email campaign, and then runs that campaign through like a sequence over a few weeks. And then that generates some more leads for us in like an actual cost-effective manner without having to employ a BDR. It's not as good as a BDR. We have a BDR also, and we're kind of running 2 side by side. I'd say the results are comparable though, and definitely more cost efficient on the AI side. And obviously allows us to scale, but we're not putting all our eggs in that basket like quite yet, just because it's still experimental. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of it.
I had a guy called Alper Yerder on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he's a kind of GTM specialist. He advises loads of founders, doing founder-led sales and things like that. And one thing he was talking about when bringing on an AI sort of tool or entity or whatever it is having this concept of like having a champion for that AI tool. And you just mentioned, because he said so often people bring on all these tools and they stack them all up, and nobody really knows. Nobody's really like championed whichever tool, and everyone's kind of just okay at using it. And then you get conflicting data, and it just makes things difficult. You mentioned there you kind of have a BDR there. Are they the person that's kind of in charge of monitoring that AI agent, or like do they kind of almost view it as competition? Like how do you? And I'm maybe playing devil's advocate here, or I'm like asking the stupid questions. So forgive me, but like. This sounds like an amazing first use case for an AI agent and things, but who is actually kind of managing it, ensuring the quality control and sort of things like that? Because I imagine that would be a lot of people's first question is, how do I make sure that this isn't just spurning out sort of AI slop and actually doing the inverse of what I want it to do?
Yeah, so like the quality control thing is super important. So what we do for every time that happens, say there's a batch of 100 people, and I have so we use OpenClaw to run this process, which is just like an AI agent that kind of works like it's similar to Claude Cowork, if people are familiar with that. So it can kind of do an arbitrary task for you, and it runs on a schedule. So it can wake up every 6 hours and like check something for you and then ping you if certain criteria are met. Or it can like passively monitor your new signups and like run this little pipeline. So what that's set up on Telegram, which is just like a chat app similar to WhatsApp. And it's just easier for working with bots and stuff. So a lot of these OpenClaw stuff, if people have heard of OpenClaw, it kind of runs over Telegram. But anyways, that pings my Telegram with the draft of 10 random leads from the list for the sequences. And then I proofread those before I okay it. So it basically comes into my phone. My phone dings. I get like the 10 drafts from like random people that it's put together using all these data points. And then I message back and I go, okay, actually, for these 2 here, like that language doesn't make sense. Or, maybe we should try this other angle and stuff. And then so I quality control the sample size of everything before it goes out. And then that works pretty reliably. The first few weeks we had a couple of hiccups, all right, where like people were getting like like bizarre emails, to be honest. Just we worked with a few issues. We hadn't scaled it yet. Which was lucky. But that's just part of course. There's some amount of experimentation. No matter how much you try with these AI systems, there's always a bit of it's a bit of a black box to a certain extent.
Of course.
But the quality control kind of works quite well. Like one little example was like I think with it did some test data, but then it like never took out the test data from one of the contacts we were emailing. So they basically just got like a random email with like test variable as the content or something. So there's little quirks like that, just figuring out how to work with AI agents and stuff. So you always have to double check all the work before it's doing anything customer facing, and arguably anything employee facing as well, to be honest.
And have you found it, again, I'm sorry, James, I'm going to be asking a lot of stupid questions here, but I think hopefully that, yeah, I say that as well, mate. Thank you. Have you found it has kind of improved itself over time? Obviously it is going to continue learning, but has that been a real process that you've actually noticed, from sort of initial creation up to kind of where you're at now? Has there been a real increase? Have you found yourself having to kind of check it less, or are you still checking it more, but noticing it's getting better?
I'm definitely checking it less, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think when you so I'm not a sales background, right? So a lot of the sales, we have some people who are kind of like informal advisors around us in sales capacities that like we talk to a lot that are like super great at what they do. So like a lot of this I'm figuring out as I'm going, but I'm like obviously engineer mindset. So like how do you?
Yeah,
it's good and bad, right? Because you always want to automate everything from the first before you even see if it works and all this stuff. But I think what we've found is that so initially it was like okay, like draft these emails mirroring this language from these call transcripts, and then it was coming back say with 100 different like sequences, and there was just no way to quality control that. Like it's just untenable. So like, all right, well maybe we need to narrow this down. So now it's like okay, there's like a decision tree for each. So it's nearly like the variables you use in like current outbound sequences, where it's like based on X and Y, this sentence should be Z, and based on this should be either A or B, and based on this other sentence should be either D or E. But you can go into like there's like 5 different variables. There's 5 different kind of decisions to make along the way, and then it mishmashes them all together. But you having to manually kind of do it. So it's kind of what it's ended up in is like a very dynamic variable based system, and then what gets sent to instantly is what we use for outbound emails. So what gets sent to instantly is just one variable, but that variable has been populated with all the information from the thing. So like that was something that took like a few weeks of trial and error to kind of like figure out exactly how that works. And I don't know because I'm not a sales background, so maybe this is just like really obvious for people who have worked in like scaled sales engines before. But that was like a trial and error. There's a few little things like that, but definitely over time, once you're personalizing, and like with OpenClaw and AI agents like that, or there's a big one now that's popular, that's getting popular. What's the name of it? I was talking to someone about this last week, but kind of similar to OpenClaw, but a bit easier to set up for non-technical people. Even though OpenClaw, you can kind of one-click install it now on a lot of the hosting providers online. So it's not, you can kind of get up and running quite quick. Anyway, it's not the hardest thing in the world. Claude will just help you get it up and running, to be honest, in like an hour. But with that, it kind of learns it has a self-learning system built into it. So it learns your personality, how you communicate and stuff as you're kind of tweaking it. And you go, yeah, add that to your memory. And then it adds it to its memory. So whenever it's doing something in future, it like has that in its memory. It's a really, really cool system. So that like across the board for all tasks is just like an ongoing process. But yeah, it certainly works quite well now after the initial kind of few hiccups and that.
And is it something that you found? Because again, it's this idea, I can't remember what Emmett, our founder, referred. It was like civilian coders or something like that. So people that are kind of going out and doing what you've done here, building your own agent and things like that. But it seems like
vibe coders, maybe.
Vibe, perhaps, yeah. Same sort of thing, yeah. But people that are going out and doing this vibe coding and they are creating an AI agent or a whatever kind of fix for whichever issue that they're currently dealing with. But then it seems like the main problem that they sort of run into is managing to plug it into all of the various other things that they're trying to run. So whether it's instantly, Attio, even attaching things to LinkedIn have really got their guardrails up for a lot of kind of things, haven't they? So how has it been kind of, managing that? And, especially as it'd be great to, get into the kind of social media content thing, because I know that's the main thing that Coso does, but how has that kind of been with, building this thing that's obviously created a really great pipeline for you, but then being able to sort of plug that into all the various other tools that you're sort of relying on? Was that a difficult process? Is that a huge part of it that maybe a lot of these vibe coders are kind of missing out on?
No, I think obviously if your technical background, there's some kind of thing, you'll save yourself some time by just knowing, like, when you're trying to deploy these things, there's a way to deploy them properly and like not properly. So you want like something from like programming. There's like this thing like environment variables. So basically, like your secret key for Anthropic, which is basically how the agent can use your Claude subscription.
Mhm.
That would be stored securely versus like insecurely. So if someone, if you have a publicly facing agent, someone can't like extract that, for example. There's a few different things like that. But to be honest with Claude, or even like ChatGPT, like if you're willing to just sit down for a few hours and just like have that open on one tab and like something like this open in another tab, you can just bang it out. Like, because like
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, what do I need to know? What do I need to be aware of that I might not be aware of, given I'm not technical about deploying this? And then they give you the checklist, and then it's like, all right, cool, those are things I need to be aware of. So like, how do I deploy this? And it'll go through, and then it'll like warn you if you're doing something wrong based on kind of what you're telling it you're doing. And then even like, so we use Hostinger for our hosting around this. So like a big thing with these was that a lot of people were trying to get their laptops running 24/7 or buying little Mac minis to be like home servers, cost like four or
Right.
£500 or whatever. Like we pay like €14 a month, I think, for like a virtual machine, basically just a server running in the cloud that hosts this for us. And that like on Hostinger, it's called a service. But that has an AI agent on it as well. So when this thing breaks, I basically just go to the Hostinger AI agent and say, oh, blah, blah. If there's any issues, like I'm like, oh, this is the story. And it's like, oh, you need to like update this file permissions to be readable by this other thing. And it's like set reasonably technical, but like it's the same as ChatGPT. So you just like go, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Do that.
Mm.
And you just kind of have to have your guard up. Like you can't just put the thing on autopilot and just go next, 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 next. But it's a lot of common sense, to be honest. It's like you don't need to be technical at all. Built if you're familiar with the concept of workflows and sequences from like a sales or marketing standpoint,
Mhm.
you can kind of build one of these things, in a couple hours without being technical, which is really, really cool and interesting. So obviously there's a huge market for these products as well. Like I think Clay, one of our theses around like customer discovery and stuff is like, one, like we don't want to sell to customers that use Clay.com because they're the same people using Claude Code and using all these tools kind of self-build, which obviously
Mhm.
for Pitstop's audience, that's like a massive overlap, right?
100%. Yeah.
But also Clay.com is probably like it's probably fucked as a company, is our opinion. Like because
Right.
like it's like everyone who would use Clay has like there's all these stories coming out on LinkedIn now about sales agencies that basically roll their own version of Clay specifically for their clients with Claude
Mhm.
Code in like a day. And they're not necessarily technical organizations. They can just like, Clay is an amazing product, but it's like very specifically like this is the stuff that like you want it to do, and it takes so much configuration, and it's not like rocket science. The stuff it does, it's just a very nice product experience. But if you can just prompt that product experience and then like do the extra 10% personalization for your specific use case, and then it only costs 10% as Clay, and the person you're already doing that for other products in your stack anyway. Beyond that, like it's yeah, that's a bit of a tangent there, but yeah.
Love a tangent. It's the whole idea of a podcast. With you mentioned there, like workflows within sort of sales and marketing and things, and it'd be great to sort of look at that idea of like go to market and stuff. And I know you've openly said yourself, that's not really the background you're in, but it's kind of the world you find yourself in now.
Yeah.
I'd love to kind of get your sort of thoughts on it, because there is this idea that in the future, previously it's been the kind of stack of like big platforms that everyone is using as part of their GTM, like a HubSpot, or they've got their CRM tied in, they've got all of the other tools kind of stacked on top of that.
Yeah.
Do you kind of see that a lot of industry? You've kind of just already answered the question before I've asked it, but it'd be cool to go down that rabbit hole a bit more. Like, do you think that's going to kind of change a bit, and it's going to be a lot more of these kind of flexible agents like the one that you've built yourself that are going to sort of connect almost like smaller tools like Coso or Pitstop and things like that, that are kind of a bit more pinpointed to a specific problem that an industry, a company an organization is dealing with, rather than something, enormous like Clay that is perhaps a bit of, dare I say, a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Do you think that's gonna kind of, as a founder, it's just great to get your insight into that. Do you think we are going to see a bit of a shift there in terms of like a GTM sort of workflow? Leaning more on agents and smaller specialist tools rather than these kind of big platforms that everyone uses.
Yeah. Yes, I would think so. Because like,
Mhm.
I think fundamentally, if you're like, if you want to vibe code a personal tool or something like that, it's like you need some sort of data that's useful, and then like a UI on top of it, and then maybe some automation around that. Like it's super easy for Claude to like one shot the functionality that like most people use in Clay. Just feed in a few API keys for the services or whatever, you know. So you have that like extrapolated out. You also have this like the rise of the go-to-market engineer, which like is someone said it's because a lot of marketing roles traditionally have been female, but for men to be doing marketing roles, we have to invent a new term for it.
GTM.
GTM engineer,
Yeah.
which was I thought was pretty funny. But like you have those roles springing up, which is basically essentially that's what the job of the role is to build like personalized sales and marketing tools within the organization. There was like automation engineers on the technical side traditionally, so you basically pay an engineer, and their full time job was putting the glue between all your different dev services, like your database and your graphs on the front end and all that stuff. So yeah, I think that's the way that things are definitely probably going. I would say
Yeah, that's such an interesting point about. So, like for context, James, like I know we didn't get that much of a chance to chat at the event and stuff because,
yeah.
like I said, you were a very popular man. But like my background is from the marketing side of things as well, and it's been so interesting for me over the last couple of years since joining Pitstop, and as we've gone into the world of AI and stuff, and like this whole sort of GTM thing like didn't exist a few years ago. It's like
Yeah.
people have invented like an entirely new category within this, and even myself and Emmett were having a conversation in Ireland, and I can't believe we were joking around about my dating profile on an app, and it was what your job role is, and I'd written GTM, and Emmett was like, "You don't do GTM," and I was like, "Well, like," and we kind of had an interesting conversation, like marketing is GTM, or is it, or where does GTM start? Because to me, in the podcast I've done before, it's like marketing feeds sales, sales leads customer success leads marketing, and we were like that's kind of the GTM function. And most people I've had on the podcast would kind of agree with that, but it's so interesting this whole new category has arrived. And I imagine for you as well, even from a product background, it's just as jarring as it is for me coming in from a marketing thing of like it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, the snake eating its own tail. Like where does this whole thing GTM start and where does it end,
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of this stuff is like there's as long as I've been around, there's been this argument of like, should you have a head of sales and marketing, or should you have a head of sales and a head of marketing, right?
Okay, that's
and like
interesting.
obviously those things are, and obviously you can tie customer support or customer success into that as well, and like obviously they're very related, but like should one person head all those organizations, or how does that work? And I think there's no clear answer. Like it's organization by organization,
I agree. Yeah.
And then you have this GTM engineering is basically like an automation engineer for like those three functions, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just such an interesting point. Going on to kind of what you do with Coso then, and the what you said doing with the agent and helping people with kind of social media content and things like that. Something that was super interesting was our mutual friend Laura, who's coming on the podcast very soon. Her kind of talk at the event was all about utilizing AI for social media content, but I guess in a slightly different way to what you're doing. Hers was more on the kind of personal branding side and why you should be posting on LinkedIn. You can use AI to help that process along, but you shouldn't necessarily use AI to like do all of the writing and sort of everything like that. It'd be great to get your sort of thoughts on this and sort of please dive in a bit more into what you're doing with Coso. But how do you envision people should be using AI, but also ensuring that maybe it sounds corny, but I think it's true. And actually from the vibes we've had, I think everyone agrees, like the idea of ensuring that like human connection remains seems to be really at the forefront of everyone's minds, and making sure that bit is still really, really important. And again, it'd be cool to get your thoughts on how we should be utilizing AI within social media while also making sure that it's a human talking to a human.
Yeah. I think like the key thing with social media now more than ever is the word like authenticity.
Yeah.
And there's interesting kind of dynamic of like whatever. I was talking to someone about actual software products, which is kind of similar to a certain extent. But it's like there's never been like a moat, or there's never been like value in anything that could be done in like an hour. So like whatever that means at any point in history, it's like anything you could do in an hour or arguably a weekend to a certain extent is like there's no actual value in that. And I think that's still true. It's just what can be done in an hour has like expanded so much.
Yeah.
So like anything, if the social media equivalent of like if you're writing your LinkedIn post, or your month's content you could do in an hour potentially or whatever. If you just banged it into ChatGPT or Claude and like didn't proofread any of it, didn't know much about you, blah blah blah, you can throw that up, but like it's not high effort content, so it's not going to do very well typically. Whereas if you spend 8 hours, you take a day out of your month and you like craft these really good posts, like obviously that's going to do better. Because even if you're using ChatGPT or Claude to like augment you, you're like proofreading stuff. You're coming up with like personal anecdotes. I met one of our customers this morning for a coffee. We had a chat for, even though we're like an AI tech company, we're like very much like agency sort of model. So we like literally we meet with all our customers when they're onboarded. We do agency style onboarding with them and all this stuff. So we try and keep it as authentic. We basically use the AI to kind of supercharge that as opposed to like replace the authenticity. And he was discussing how like we were discussing how he could put together. He's like a business coach who's like running like 5 different businesses now. He's like in his 60s, a really really nice guy, really interesting guy. And he's basically going to come back to me over the weekend with a document that's a few thousand words explaining like the narrative around like his early business life, how he believes the way he is, like what methodology he brings into his business coaching. We specifically focused on like family businesses and transitional family businesses and that sort of thing, which is a really interesting dynamic, like siblings who may hate each other running a business together and like how that
Understood
works. And it's really, really cool. Like his whole line of work is super, super cool. He's going to come back to me with like a 3,000 word document on Monday. That's assisted. He's going to assist writing that with ChatGPT. We're going to then come up with a content plan based on that. That's like 2 posts a week for the next 3 months. All based on his actual lived experience and how he believes, how he is the way he is, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's like an anecdote, but like I think that's the way you want to use it. So like similarly, we're finding we had an issue with like some customers want to come to us and they want to do absolutely nothing and just AI will generate all my content. And like we have some of those customers and like we do our best with the AI to generate that content. Like they're like they don't want it to be amazing. They'd love to be amazing. They know they're not going to put in the work to help it be amazing. But like it's a pulse online. It's going up. There's good, high quality, like professional looking content going out in their pages every week or a few times a week, whatever. What we found recently is it was way better for us to work with companies that have a data source somewhere of like proprietary stuff. Mm-hmm. So we launched a partnership with a company called iCabby recently, this week actually, who have they the taxi infrastructure or the infrastructure for taxi fleets. It's about 1,000 fleets in UK, Ireland, or in North America. So they're giving us a database access. So then we can go into their database. And for this taxi fleet, it's like AI doing all the work, but we can go in and we can say, oh, like it's taxi fleet in London, like Olivia Rodrigo had a concert last week and Elton John had a concert the week before. And Elton John got twice as much taxis as Olivia Rodrigo.
No way.
And like really fun content like that. No, that's not factually correct.
No, but it's a cool concept. It's a really cool concept.
But it might be factually correct. I need to double check that. But anyways, that's like really cool. It's completely proprietary, really interesting. And we got the idea for that based on Monzo. Yeah. They do all the cool marketing, like Greg's versus Pret, and like where people spend more money, and in like London's Pret and the rest of the UK.
Spotify Wrapped. It's like the Spotify Wrapped style model, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But like, so then the customer doesn't have to do much because that's a barrier to using our product. But we're still accessing proprietary data for that customer that makes the content authentic to that business and stuff that only that business can talk about. And that's kind of how we're approaching it from our perspective, is like, how do we take what's unique about you and use AI to kind of accelerate or supercharge that, as opposed to just using AI to just blanket create everything? Because that's we've seen, like, obviously intuitively, like that's just not going to work very well.
It's such a good point, because I think when it comes to something like social media content, people assume it's either black or white. You either sit down old school, with a quill and parchment and write it yourself, and then you can, kind of put that up on LinkedIn and don't use anything, or you solely use ChatGPT. And actually, I think it's really refreshing to hear from someone of your success and where you're at, that there is actually a middle ground, and that it's okay to use these AI tools to accelerate it and to help you with it and stuff. But you just need to make sure that you're going in and, like what we said at the beginning, like quality control. With the, when you say you're getting data sources and stuff from these companies and things, are you using an agent and stuff to kind of comb through that? Or is that still like a human-led process to kind of take that? Is that still like the creative side, or have you got an agent kind of doing that, or does that get sort of run through AI to sort of pull out interesting moments? Like, how does that kind of work? I recognize I'm maybe getting inside baseball, and feel free to tell me to fuck off if so. But
it's not like so like it's not like, I suppose that piece of it isn't necessarily rocket science, but basically we use an old school like database query to query. So like we basically pull all the data into our system based on the customer ID for that third party. So say for the iCabby stuff, we'll get the fleet ID. And that's in the iCopy database. And then we can pull the data into our system. And then once the data's in our system, we can run some cool stuff. So we've got about 20 or so kind of preformed queries, like cross-correlating dates with like interesting events like concerts and stuff. And like, okay, Rodrigo's playing in general vicinity of this taxi company last Saturday. So that's kind of interesting. And then we can do some of those sorts of stats. Or like we can be like, okay, so the shortest taxi ride last month was like 120 meters down the road. Like why did someone do that? Or like who got the taxi from like Brighton to Liverpool, like, or fun stuff like that. We got about 20 or so kind of preset kind of things to look for, and then it surfaces like we kind of see them with like we can review them or the customer can review them or whatever for just a quality, once again a quality control, like a sample of them. Like, okay, this is the general thing that like we want to be looking for. But we can apply it. We're also talking to like a car dealership marketplace at the moment that we haven't announced it yet, but we're like basically agreed a partnership. Same concept of like cars, but then it's like, okay, well, you're selling a BMW X5, that's great, but also we can then create a post around maintaining your BMW X5. Or if you're getting like an electric car, like here are £2,000 to save you. Or if the dealership sells electric cars, like new electric cars, like here's £2,000 to save you £20,000 off your new electric car. Or like there's so much like fun stuff and that's all stuff because obviously the car dealerships are already posting their content on the car marketplace. They're never going to stop doing that, and they don't have to do anything else extra themselves essentially. And we can create all this cool content for them, just send it across to them. They go, yeah, looks good, and it gets posted.
That's awesome. I love that. Just before we kind of finish up, I know we kind of very briefly mentioned it before, but I imagine one of the big questions for anyone listening is like, whatever kind of business they've got, they're probably sat there going like, what is a good first use case for me if I want to create an AI agent? Where is that sort of best place to get started? Because like you said, a lot of this is workflows and automations and, getting that thing going. And once you start getting into that flow and you're going down that alley, it's usually quite easy to just kind of follow the numbers and continue the prompts and build whatever it is. But it's the getting started that I think a lot of people struggle with. So, I guess this is maybe a bit of a generic question, but where is that kind of first touch point? Where is that best place to start when you want to start building an AI sort of sales agent or just agent in general for an organization? Or is that too broad a question? Again, maybe it's stupid.
No, I mean like so like if you want to, no one's going around being like there's some people going around being like, I'd love to use AI agents, but I just don't have anything for them to do.
Okay.
There is some people I assume doing that, but the majority of people are like, oh, this really annoying thing that I think an agent might be able to do. Or like AI, I think I've used ChatGPT a bit, and I think a better version of ChatGPT could probably solve this problem properly. So I don't have to go in and talk to ChatGPT every day. So I think that actually the first thing is to move from ChatGPT to Claude, to be honest. We moved our non-technical operations lead, Chris, she was using ChatGPT for the last few months. We moved her to Claude about a month ago, and she's in our chat she's like not technical at all. She's marketing background, and she's in our chat every day like, oh my god, like Claude can do this, and like she's actually after basically building her own agent for some of her work. She's not technical at all, just like within Claude essentially. Because Claude kind of gets you. ChatGPT is still mostly like a chat kind of based experience, like back and forth. Claude kind of blurs the lines a lot more. It operates where it's like kind of nearly agentic, just chatting to it, and it can set up skills to do things for you, and it can talk you through how to do that and stuff. If you just go like, oh, can you automate this for me so I don't have to talk to you again about it? Like, it'll just set that up. It's like that's really cool. And then see if like you can chat away to Claude for a few minutes or for an hour or something to solve your problem for one specific use case, and then just ask it like, okay, how can you just do this for me in future? Or like, how could we solve this problem better? Do you need access to any data or anything? And then it can kind of set that up for you. But like, you're learning how Claude Code works as well. If you're in any way building a product or you want to build automations or something, Claude Code, because it's called Claude Code, sounds really, really intimidating for non-technical people. But it literally takes about like a minute and a half to get set up and get running on your machine, even if you're not technical. Depending, if you're on a Mac, it's like a minute and a half. If you're on Windows, it might be 10 minutes. But either way, you don't need to be technical, and Claude will just walk you through how to do it. Like, you download a thing, you click run, maybe you have to change a setting. Claude will tell you what settings to change on your machine. And then you can actually just interact with that to spin up like single web pages for stuff or build automations that kind of do things, and you can set them on schedules to run automatically and stuff. But it's like, and as soon as I start saying that, it's like people's like, so people's heads are like, they're like, I just gloss over. But like, it sounds very intimidating or daunting, but like, just get started on Claude. Ask it how you should solve a problem or how it can help you solve a specific problem, and then ask it like how it can solve that automatically for you in future, and just go from there. I think is the
Yeah. James, I love that. So much wisdom, so much knowledge, value within this space. Like things, as we said in the room in Dublin, like things are just moving so quickly that even people who are in the center of AI and in the center of this are still kind of almost feeling left behind. So, it's great to get some insight from you about, especially the agentic side of things. Where can people go if they want to find out more about what you get up to, whether it's, yourself or with Coso AI?
So probably LinkedIn is my own main professional platform. Naturally enough, we do all our LinkedIn content. But I'm posting there quite a lot. It's often me actually posting instead of AI as well.
Love it.
So James Flynn, Coso AI, do a Google search. I'll show up. Probably on LinkedIn. Is probably the best place to get me. Or Coso AI is our company as well. It takes a few minutes to sign up. You get on board in a few minutes. You can kind of get a feel for what we actually do.
Love it. Yeah, there'll be the link to James's LinkedIn in the show notes for wherever you're watching or listening to this as well, guys, so you can connect with him there. Thanks again, James, for coming on. Thanks to everybody else for listening, and we will see you all for the next one.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, man, Sandy. Really appreciate it.